we're going to bring up Elizabeth Yin, co-founder, general partner of Hustle Fund.
Thanks, Wayne.
How you doing, Elizabeth?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. Welcome to Tech Inclusion.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
Awesome, awesome. So, Elizabeth, tell us about your journey. Like I was looking you up, because this is our first time meeting.
I'm sorry?
This is our first time meeting, correct?
It is, but I've been following you for a long time, like from Numi.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So, yeah. So I think we have pretty similar backgrounds, entrepreneur to Accelerator.
Yeah.
And then now on the venture side. So that's a little bit about me. I started a company called LaunchBit. Several years later, we had a modest exit and then ran the Accelerator program of 500 startups. And then now I am running a fund called Hustle Fund.
Yeah. So, did you always know you want to be an investor?
Oh, no, definitely not. I mean, I don't come from this world. I did grow up in the Silicon Valley during the dot-com boom. So that's actually how I first got the idea that, oh, you know, there's this cool thing called startups. And that's how I ended up doing a startup in the first place. But I never thought about investing.
So what did you want to do early on before getting into startups? What was that like? Hey, I'm going to...
Yeah, so actually, quick funny story. So I grew up here in the Bay Area during the dot-com boom. This is sort of dating myself a little bit. And my freshman year of high school, my best friend Jennifer said to me, hey, my cousin is starting a company. And I had no idea what this meant. And she was like, do you want to help out during winter break? And I had nothing else going on. So I was like, sure, yeah, whatever. And so we went up to her cousin Tony's startup office. We were not helpful, but we saw a lot. It was really cool. Tony and his friends, they were working and building stuff and bringing all these seemingly important people into meetings, and they could eat all the pizza they wanted. It was the dream. And I didn't know this at the time, but a couple of years later, Tony sold that company to Microsoft for hundreds of millions of dollars. He is now the CEO of Zappos today, so that Tony. And but before I knew about any of the success that you could have with a startup, what I was fixated on was like, this is amazing. You can build something really awesome with your friends. That was what I latched onto, and that's what I knew I wanted to do.
Oh, great, great. So with that, you have LaunchBit. Can you talk a little bit about what LaunchBit was? Is it still up and running? Or?
It is. The parent company still runs it.
Okay. And it was acquired in 2014. Tell us about that vision in terms of why did you launch it at the time and the process of it being acquired? And what did you learn from that?
Yeah. So actually the same friend from high school, Jennifer, and I started LaunchBit together. Like it was actually in high school where we formed a pact that we would start a company together someday. And that didn't happen for a long time. High school kind of came and went, college came and went, and we went our separate ways for a long time. But we teamed up in about 2010, and we actually tried a number of startup ideas. And I think the gist is we started LaunchBit because we wanted to essentially build a platform to help companies acquire customers. It ended up turning into an ad platform, which we ended up doing because we followed the money. Because as a really small startup without very much money, like you do whatever it takes. And I think I'm still trying to reconcile with this philosophically today. You very often don't have a choice. You chase the money, like when you're at that stage. But to be honest, like running an ad business is like not very fun. Like there are all kinds of things in the ad business that are just distasteful as well. We ended up selling it to a company that was a partner of ours, whom we had worked with during LaunchBit, and eventually, after actually a couple of times of their asking whether we wanted to sell it, we got to the point where it made sense. I mean, they had been working with us, making money from us, and so they knew how much it was worth to them, and I think frankly, we were, to be honest, a little bit tired of like running this business, and I think something that if I were to go back in time and think about more is, how do you make sure that you are following a mission that you really want to work towards for the long haul? And if it ends up deviating, do you chase the money or do you continue on the mission? And I don't actually have a good answer for that, but that's a long-winded story.
Got it. And now you're at the Hustle Fund. what's the thesis behind Hustle Fund? Why now, and what's so different about it? What excites you? Like when you wake up in the morning, like I have the Hustle Fund, I'm gonna make magic and work with entrepreneurs.
Yeah, so Hustle Fund is a pre-seed fund, and I'll talk about our model in a second because it's actually very different from a lot of VCs. But going back to what I was saying about mission, one of the things that I noticed, so sold LaunchBit, after I transitioned out of the parent company, I went to 500 startups. And originally I went to 500 startups to mentor startups, not as an investor, but got more and more sucked into the investing side and eventually became an investor, ran the Accelerator program there, and so I've now invested in a number of seed companies. And as you all know, they've invested in so many companies, they have a large portfolio, so I've had the opportunity to see and coach a lot of companies. And I noticed that, I've backed companies with pedigree and people who, look certain ways or of certain demographics, et cetera. If you fit a certain mold, like you have pedigree, you're a certain race, certain gender, whatever you want to call it, worked at a certain company, you're extroverted, you have advantages, and then the flip side is also true. People who do not fit the mold, are at a serious disadvantage, especially when raising money at the very early stages. There's not a whole lot of data to know whether a company is a great company or not. And that always just sort of stuck with me, like, this is really unfair. I have personally coached a number of companies where it's like, these people are great executors. They set a goal this week, they do it. They set a goal next week, they do it. Like, they just keep going, they just keep accomplishing. But it would be really hard for them to raise money because they don't fit that mold. The flip side is also true. I also have portfolio companies that have great resumes, great pedigree, like fit that mold, and they are terrible executors. They have no problems raising money. Yeah. So sort of long-winded, Hustle Fund, our mission is to level the playing field for entrepreneurs. And by that, what I mean is, I think this industry needs to be more merit-based. And can you bring objectivity to these very early stages? And having observed all these startups, I think the answer is yes. Like, the one thing that all of our successful founders have in common is that they execute with speed. Like, speed is the thing that we look for at Hustle Fund. Don't tell me about your vision. I don't want to know about your vision. I want to know, how are you, running? And so that's sort of the long-winded answer, and that's why I'm doing Hustle Fund. I know there are bajillion-1 funds these days.
Yeah, well, it's still not bajillion-1 pre-seed Hustle Funds, though. You bring up some interesting point around, when I was looking at the early-stage entrepreneurship space, especially around underrepresented entrepreneurs, the pre-seed stage is the biggest need. And most people don't think about that. And from an accelerator standpoint, 500 YC, Techstars, you name it, they see literally thousands of applications. And 500 takes bigger batches. YC, I think 20 they now take more batches as well. But so what about let's say if they see 5,000, they only take 20. What about the rest, right? Yeah. What about the rest? Are those not good deals? Are those not good companies? And so do you believe that's going to be the magic spot or the win spot for Hustle Fund? And do you see more funds get into that area, we don't work on a pre-seed, and we want to work on a pre-seed for not this typical entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, so I think it's sort of, there are a couple of things you wrapped in there. So it's a moving target. So if you look at 500 startups and YC, they used to make very early bets, in teams that basically had nothing. We were one of them. When I was running the 500 Accelerator program, just the competition got really fierce, and a lot of teams coming in had a ton of traction. Teams even coming in with $1 million run rate. This is early, but not that early. That's pretty accomplished. And so, of course, if you're an investor, you're going to want to take something that's a little bit more de-risked, right? And so all of these programs have just moved slightly later. 500, YC, Techstars, you name it. And even some of the VCs who used to bet early, first round capital is probably third round capital now or something. Yeah. So that's, frankly, I'm doing pre-seed because it's an opportunity. If everybody and their mother were doing pre-seed, I should not be doing pre-seed. And I think, Charles Hudson, another pre-seed investor, that's why he's doing it too. We see this void. There are a lot of great companies, to answer your question, in this stage. I think one of the reasons, though, why investors move downstream is they think that traction de-risks the business. And it does to a certain extent. But just because you have, like, say, $10,000 in revenue per month, it doesn't mean that this business is a hit business.
Yeah.
And so, but people have a false sense of security from the traction. And for me, actually, one of the observations was it's less about the traction. I mean, traction is a byproduct of execution. It's less about the traction. It's more about what are you doing quickly to de-risk things. And that's what we look for at Hustle Fund. Like, okay, you don't have very much now. You have maybe some form of a product that is going to change a whole bunch. And you have some idea of your customer. But like there are the teams who, let's say, do customer development interviews in, let's say, 2 days. And then there are the teams that spread it out across 2 months. I want the team that does it in 2 days who get the quickest learning. And then they iterate and then like do another sprint in 2 days. Like I want those teams who do these quick sprints rather than the teams that are like just taking months to build their product or months to chat with customers. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that speed even though there's not a lot of traction.
No, that's great. I like it. I like it a lot. So are you part accelerator and part fun? Cause I saw that, because now I was looking at different models of accelerators, and I believe that now we can have a virtual accelerator, where years before it just wasn't ready, right?
Yeah.
And so I was looking at your deck for Hustle Fund and see that, there's some virtual things going on there.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's not an accelerator program, but it's got accelerator-esque components. And I think, honestly, money's becoming commoditized. Like, if people are just giving you money, you can decide what money to take. So VCs all have to be value add now in order to win deals. And so for us, we're writing a small check, $25K. That doesn't really move the needle for many people, especially here in the Bay Area with housing being so expensive. So, but our value add, Eric, my co-founder, and I, we were both entrepreneurs, and we have a customer acquisition background. So that's what we help our founders with for a few weeks. So it's not a program, there's no demo day, but can we help? Yeah, we've been in these shoes before.
Oh, that's great, that's great. So there's a lot happening in the VC space, a lot.
Oh, yeah.
We go back to last year, and where Ellen had a lawsuit, and she was on stage yesterday. And prior to that, it was kind of like you don't talk about it, right? Prior to that, it's like you don't talk about sexual harassment, you don't talk about, other stuff. And now we see a lot of doors, or we see a lot of stories around Me Too.
Yep.
Is some of that part of your like, I want to make it? So I want to be a role model for other women investors, or I want to disrupt this VC ecosystem. Like, how can I change the status quo over here?
Oh, definitely. I think there are a number of problems with this industry, and that is certainly a big one. And I do think that, our business work at Hustle Fund, like trying to make this more of a meritocracy in the way that we do due diligence, in the questions that we ask entrepreneurs. And I mean, ultimately, I think it shows in our numbers as well of our portfolio companies, which we can talk about too. If we can bring successful companies, and this is a long-term game, but if we can bring successful companies who don't fit the traditional pattern matching or whatever you call it, and become investors, so again, long-term game, I think many of these problems will start to go away. In the short term, though, I do think it is the responsibility actually more on the VC side to call out, partners of theirs who are bad actors. It's their responsibility to do that. I think, ultimately it's great that a lot of founders are finding courage to come forward. And that's amazing, given that it is so hard to do that. But I really think it's the VCs who need to do that.
Agreed. We can clap for that. Agreed. Thank you. On that note, your investment thesis is also around, speed and everyone, right? You're not saying inclusion, not saying diversity. All of them, I was talking a little bit about that a few minutes ago. Has that affected any conversations with your LPs that you didn't think you would have around saying, what do you mean by everyone? Or are you going to talk about diversity? Or are you going to talk about inclusion? Has that come up?
Actually, no. I mean, for us as a first-time fund, investors, at the end of the day, they just care about whether they can make money. So all our questions that we're getting are like, is this speed thesis legit? Like, especially at pre-seed, we're saying that this is the data that we're looking at to make decisions. Like, how fast are you going? And, investors are either on board with that thesis or they're like, well, I don't know if that's actually true. Like, so those are more the questions we get. Not actually about, nothing to do with D&I or anything like that.
There's programs, we know Mitch and Frida Kapoor Center for Social Impact is a sponsor of Tech Inclusion, and we know that with their portfolio, they have a diversity inclusion pledge, they have a VC, they work with Project Include and Ellen's team around VC Include. Is that going to be something you're going to be exploring with your founders and your portfolio companies around how can they hustle around diversity? How can they create inclusive teams early? Is that going to be part of like the narrative?
Yeah, that's very interesting. So I think philosophically in my head the answer is yes, but in practicality with my time at the moment just so bogged down and swamped with even just sort of the basics of our fund since we are new, like I can't even think about that right now, but I know it is important because I've backed companies before, obviously who are now like 2 or 3 years older, and they are having problems. Like and by that I mean my friend Andrea Berka wrote a great post about this. In essence, the post is if you don't get D&I right in the beginning, then you end up down this like mole hole, if you will, of just sort of this culture or this certain demographic of people that makes it actually really hard to recruit after that. And you actually lose out on a lot of talent that you could be getting because you've created this culture. And so it needs to be addressed very early. And some of my portfolio companies actually have suffered from that. And now they're trying to fix it. And that's a lot harder to fix when you have 30 people.
Yeah, agreed. I want to talk a little bit about the technology side of things because I was talking with Arlen with this also because unless you're doing something super technical around like, hardware, drones, or everything can be measured now. There's tons of APIs, and that's part of your investment thesis also to help entrepreneurs build dashboards.
Yep.
How do you see that as being a key, something that really separates your fund apart, saying you help companies create this dashboard to really measure their traction and growth, help them reach customers early versus other institutions? Is that like, again, near the accelerator model, kind of like working with entrepreneurs to see something that's going to set you apart?
Yeah, even so, I would say if I had to break it down, like 80% of our portfolio is, I don't know what you call it, but our bread and butter is like you can grab revenue early, like you can start selling tomorrow. 20% is in sort of more deep tech or, you're in a more regulated area where you cannot sell tomorrow for whatever reason. But you can still measure speed. Like, I have a couple of past portfolio companies who are in this category, and yes, it takes them a long time to build a product, like a self-driving car or an airplane or whatever, but you can still measure speed, like how quickly are they shipping? Like, what are their GitHub commits, et cetera. Many of these companies also need to do customer development. Like, how many conversations are you having? Did you call up anybody? So even if you're not actually selling or doing lead gen or anything like that, there are still ways to measure speed. Like, are you doing anything?
Got it. Yeah, last question. Why does this matter to you? Why does this work around what we're doing here at the conference around diversity and inclusion, around creating inclusive culture, startups? Why does it matter to you? What's your why?
That's pretty deep. Yeah, so Hustle Fund is my last job, and I was, thinking like, well, what do I want my legacy to be? Like, what do I want to work on for the next 30 years? And part of it is sparked by what we talked earlier. Like, I don't want to run an ad business, and that's no offense to anybody who is running an ad business, but for me, it doesn't get me up in the morning. And just kind of having been in this industry, tech, startups, and then now investing, there are a lot of problems. A big problem is around sort of this meritocracy bit. It's not fair if you are like a great entrepreneur, and I define that as a fast executor, but it's not fair. And I think, from a business standpoint, if you can solve that, you can actually make a lot of money. But also from a mission standpoint, like let's try to make the world a little bit more fair. I think for me personally, I'll be the first to admit that like I do come from a privileged background, and I've probably benefited from that system. But if I had been, sort of just born into other circumstances, or or a different demographic or whatnot, like I could not do the same things and still be here, and that is not fair. And I think we need to move towards a world of that, and this is the world I understand, so I want to do that in this world.
Great. Well, thank you for the work.
So,
Cool. Awesome,
thank you.
Elizabeth.
Thanks,
Thank
Mike.
you.
I
Thank you all.
appreciate that.
That's great.
Thanks a lot.